my gosh. Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. It is me, Bria. Today I'm actually bringing to you my 5-star reads of 2022. To be fair, it doesn't take much for me to rate something 5 stars. But what I do read, I do have high expectations of. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 5-star reads out of 40 books in 2022. I am so excited to talk about these books. I think about each and every one of them and I'm like, oh yeah, I remember how much fun I actually had while reading those books. So usually when I'm reading, there's a few things. The writing has to be good. I can't be distracted, and if I feel thrown off in any way, it's an automatic deduction on a star. I have to love the characters, I have to be attached to them some way, or I have to feel connected to the story or what these characters are going through. I can hate the characters, but I have to at least understand them. And the writing and the plot just have to be good, essentially. That's my criteria. I also have other criteria when it comes to different genres, but I'm looking at most of the genres that I have, and I have 2 YA books, 4 romance, and 1 literary fiction. But I feel like I have kind of a diverse group of books here, so let me just shut the fuck up. In terms of romance, I depend heavily on my girl, Katie Robert, okay? She is one of my favorite romance authors ever. I like that she tries to get diverse within her writing. I do have a few critiques of her writing, or the way that she wants to diversify her writing. Sometimes it can come off like a little bit forced and unnatural, and it doesn't really help the plot in any way. The only way I can describe it is that the way she inserts the information doesn't feel as cohesive as the standard, like, white, cis, gendered character that she writes, if that makes sense. But I really did enjoy Electric Idol by Katie Robert. I actually think this was my first book that I read by Katie Robert. I read the Olympus series kind of out of order. So I started with this one, and then I read Neon Gods. I didn't like Neon Gods as much as I liked Electric Idol. I feel like the chemistry between these characters were a little bit better. I felt like it was a little bit more entertaining with like the social media element. And there was just like a little bit more drama and depth, and like while there wasn't as much like sexy scenes and things like that, I did feel like in Neon Gods that Persephone and Hades' relationship was more focused around Persephone's discovery of her being sexual, whereas in this one, where Psyche feels a little bit more dimensional than Persephone did. So I really did enjoy this one, and it got 5 stars for me. I had fun reading it, and to be honest, if you want to check out Katie Robert, I suggest this series. I read like some of her other novellas and things like that, but this one, just stick with this series. Okay, so the next romance read that I have for you is by Sierra Simone, and that is Sinner. This is a part of, I believe, a trilogy. And it follows so I did give this book 5 stars, but I just read this line that just made me like It's like, they have words for men like me: playboy, womanizer, skirt chaser. My brother used to be a priest, and he only has one word for me: sinner. Oh my god. What is your name, dude? To be honest, I do not remember any of these characters' names, but the story follows a man and a woman. Their families are kind of torn apart. They kind of have this rift between each other because of the Bell family, which is the male lead's family. Their younger sister passed in the first book. It's no knowledge. That's not really like a spoiler. They talk about it like openly on both the back and front, but there is this like rift between the family, and it's somehow connected to the younger sister's passing. And so these two families, kind of like a little Romeo Juliet situation. And from what I remember, I felt like there was a lot of emotional moments between the two characters. I felt like they had a pretty good connection, pretty good chemistry. I will say that for this book, if you're not really into age play, and kind of like a dominant, submissive type relationship, there is a tiny bit of it in here. But otherwise, I had fun with the story. I also think it has this really interesting connection, and the main male lead has so many interesting conversations and conflicts about sex and religion, and you kind of get this detailed story of how he's returning back to religion while the female lead is trying to figure out her own relationship with religion and sex and how far she wants to go for religion. So I think it brings up this like these just really interesting topics about God, surprisingly, even though it's like super smutty, but you also get these like really cute moments of like bonding between the two characters, which I really enjoyed. Of course it's a romance, so I do think it gets a little cheesy. The male lead is a white man and the female lead is a black woman, so that's kind of enjoyable. We do kind of get this scene where we get a few scenes where they kind of point to her race, which is really nice. But I do have a bit of criticism about some of the race-related conversations that we've had within this book. I can't remember the race of the author, but again, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the story. I enjoyed the thoughts that it made me have. So it is a 5-star read of 2022. This next one, I fucking love this book so much. And if it wasn't for another book on this list, okay, so if it wasn't for another 2 books on this list, I feel like it would be number 1. In a way, I feel like it's my number 1 read of 2022, but at the same time, like, I don't know, I felt like everyone was so good. If I were to give one suggestion, like give one book recommendation off of all of the books that I read this year, it would be The Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. This book is a kind of re-entry into the Dracula story, where kind of interacting with Dracula's consorts. And so this one follows Constanza. I think that's how you say her name. She is the first wife of Dracula. And we go on this journey with her, and her realizing that her husband, this man that she loves, is a literal monster. And we kind of experience this like psychological and emotional abuse, and different ways you can be coerced in a relationship. You see like a lot of boundaries being crossed by this dynamic. And I don't know, the reason why this book made such an impact on me is because I've experienced a relationship like this. So I feel like while it is in this like fantasy type world, you do also get these moments that are dipped in reality. So I will say that this book does come with a trigger warning for emotional, at times physical abuse. I don't know if I would say sexual coercion, but a lot of sexual boundaries are crossed within this novel too. But it's also just kind of fun. I will say that for me, this book was a 5 stars because I related to it and I connected to it, but I do feel at the end of the book, it does kind of fall apart a little bit in terms of just kind of the interactions between the characters. I feel like their characterization kind of weakens a little bit, so they're not consistent. But at the same time, I can't tell if it's because of everything that the characters have faced throughout the story, or if it's just because the writing itself got a little weak. But I will say this is one of my favorite books from this year, and if I were to recommend any book, it would be this one. The next book, some people hate it, some people love it. I loved it. I love the grumpy pairing in it, and that is Book Lovers by Emily Henry. I love this book so much that I don't want to read another Emily Henry book, just because I don't want to mess up like my feelings towards this book. I feel like a lot of people didn't really jam with what was her other one? People We Meet on Vacation, and she has a second one. I feel like people didn't really jam with those other ones. But she does have another book coming out in 2023 that I am going to read. And if that one just ruins it for me, then I'll just go back and read the other ones and see what happens. But this book follows Nora and what is homeboy's name? Charlie. And they're both, I guess they're both in like the writing industry. They both end up in this small town for different reasons. And they both have this like typical small town fairy love story, but at the same time they both acknowledge that neither of them belong there. And so I think that's it's kind of like a fun twist on that like small town trope, and rather than being like grumpy sunshine, it's these two grumpy assholes who are just trying to figure out their emotions. They're kind of emotionally stunted, but they're so sweet and they just make so much sense together. And I just loved it. I felt like they were perfect, and I didn't feel like any part of their interactions were forced. It was just so good, and I liked the ending, and it was just good vibes. So I definitely recommend Book Lovers. Next we have Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas. This is a reread for me. I read this during the month of October because, of course, it's Halloween. The perfect time to read Cemetery Boys. I literally waited all year to reread this book. And then I read it twice. But, oh my god, I still have the spot marked where it makes me cry. I think I talked to you guys about this. There's a specific point in this book that always makes me cry. And I know exactly where it's coming. I know how to open the book and find it. Like, that's how much I love this story. Honestly, this book makes me want to put more Aiden Thomas stories on my TBR for 2023, which I will talk to you guys about my reading goals a little bit later. But this book follows two boys, Yadriel and Julian, who are so cute. Yadriel is a trans boy, and he's trying to prove himself to be a brujo so that he can honor his family traditions in the way that a man would within his family structure. Along the way of trying to basically prove himself, him and his cousin Maritza run along into this mystery of what is happening to the ghosts within the cemetery that their family is charged with protecting. And that is where they find Julian, who somehow mysteriously died. And I just loved all of this. I love the conversation that it opens up. I love exploring these complicated family dynamics. I loved exploring these complicated feelings around gender and gender within a culture and society that expects you to adhere to certain gender roles in order to be considered that gender. And I don't know, it was just such a good book. And I feel like if you're trying to submerge yourself in a diverse story, or a story that kind of expands your worldview, this is the perfect one to start with, especially if you're oh my god, it's just so fucking good. This is just like a great place to start to me. I got into reading more about more LGBT characters when I was introduced to Adam Silvera. They both die at the end, and More Happy Than Not, and those were really impactful to me as a little bi baby, and just kind of getting introduced to more of those stories. But I think something that happens, and not to get on a soapbox, in like the LGBT community, is that like sometimes we get so entrenched in our own stories, right, in our own perspectives. But I think even if you're someone who's a part of the community, you can expand out and learn more by just engaging in stories that talk about it. So this is so good, and I can't wait to reread it again. I honestly, if I reread this like 4 more times over the next year, I wouldn't be surprised. It's so good. 5 stars. This next 5-star, fucking gorgeous, okay? fucking gorgeous. And it is not only the writing, but the story that is fucking gorgeous. Let me get the names together. Hold on. This story follows Xingyan. She is literally the daughter of the moon goddess, and she's lived in isolation for so long. She has no idea why, but she's been raised a certain way, and she's starting to develop powers and things like that that start to draw the attention to really important and dangerous people within their society. And so her mother ends up sending her away, and she gets tossed into this like crazy adventure where she basically learns how to unisolate herself and step into her power, both like just like as a woman who's training to fight and be educated and all these things, but also just as a person, you know what I'm saying? Like, she develops so much throughout the story, and it's just so beautiful. I think what made this story for me is, one, the writing in this is insanely beautiful. It is the most beautiful writing ever. And like, I don't even know how to explain it. Like, you know, that type of writing where you're just kind of completely immersed. Like, she's very, how do you describe it? She's very scenic within her writing. My sister writes the same. It's like where you get every detail of every aspect that's around you. It's kind of like when they talk about meadowing, how like when women talk, we give you all the details about like what's happening, what does it look like, what's in the meadow type thing. And I think this is what makes this so beautiful, and what makes this world so fully developed is the fact that like I can envision everything, and it's just so good. I feel like our female lead is so strong. There's like a droplet of romance, like a tiny droplet of romance, and almost like a tiny droplet of a love triangle. But like what I love is that like it's almost, I don't want to use edging for a YA book, but it's kind of like just teasing you a little bit, like a will they won't they type thing, but then at the same time you don't care. Like, it's not like the most important part of the story that you care about. You're just kind of like, oh wait, that was kind of cute, oh wait, that was kind of sweet, oh I see what's happening there, it was a little flirty. Like, that's what was really good about this story, and I just think it's so good. I think you guys should also definitely read this. The second book, I believe, also is coming out in 2023, so get on it. This last book is my only 5-star from literary fiction, and it is another debut album. It is Black Cake by Charmaine Wilkerson. This story follows 2 siblings who are trying to uncover the truth about their mother, Eleanor. What really got me about this book, it just reminded me of what it feels like to desperately try to know the people within your family. I feel like, especially like, you know, I went through this experience like a couple of years ago where I had this deep and almost painful desire to know the history of my grandmothers. And so I would ask my mom and my dad all about them, and it wasn't like pulling teeth. Like, it was easy to kind of talk to them and I could ask them questions, you know. But there's so much that I didn't know about them, and there's so much that I will never hear from their own mouths, right? And so like, this book is exactly that. It's like, there's so much that these children will never hear from their parents' mouths, and from specifically their mother's mouth. There's so much history to like this mother's story. It's so painful, it's so raw, it's so deep, and she had to move through so many things and face so many challenges that they just never thought of, and they never connected to. And so they have to reconnect to each other, to her, to their family, all while navigating grief and death and everything. And the way the mom does this, even after death, is she makes her children enjoy a black cake together after they've gone through the whole entirety of the will and listen to what she has to say. And so they have to face a lot of hard things, and it's really tough. I will say it's a really tough read. The trigger warnings for this one is death on so many scales, forced marriage, coercion, rape, abuse, a lot, gang violence. Yeah, so definitely check the trigger warnings on this one, but it's such a beautiful story. To be honest, actually, now that I take it back. If I were to suggest one book for someone to read, I actually would suggest Black Cake from my 22 list. Read Black Cake. I will say it does get a little confusing, so I did take notes. I did tab things, you know, because it really does sound like an old person in your family trying to tell you a story. And so you gotta really pay attention. You gotta keep your eyes wide open. But it was really good. It was really good, and I can't wait to read more by Charmaine. Okay guys, so those were my 5-star reads of 2022. Only 7 out of 40 books were 5-star reads. I cannot wait for 2023 to read all these amazing books. I'm finally gonna get to A Prairie of the Orange Tree. I committed myself to it. If that is the only book I read all year, I would be so happy. I can't wait to talk to you guys about my reading goals. And thank you for watching. And tell me, what were your 5-star reads of 2022? I would love to hear them. Thank you. Bye. And I hope you have a happy holiday. And I will talk to you guys later. Bye. Oh wait, and then leave a like, comment, subscribe. Talk to you guys later. You know the drill. All right, bye.